Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Our Foundations podcast. My name is Joshua. I am your host, and today's episode will be an overview and introduction of Season 4 of the show. This is also an introductory episode for new listeners. I know there are plenty who have come on board since the beginning of the show a few years ago, and this season will be the perfect place to come in at if you are relatively new. So, let me just start off with what is happening for Season 4, then I'll introduce the new folks to the show as a whole, then I will cover the structure of Season 4 a little more. So overall, what I want to do for this season, Season 4, will be to do a roughly short season, at least shorter than previous seasons, and I want to consolidate and connect the content from the previous seasons and bring all of that together, make a lot of connections, bring in some new information, that kind of stuff. So that is the overall goal for Season 4. But I want to start off, I guess, by introducing newer folks to the show so that you have an idea of what you're getting into. So this show is overall kind of a critical analysis of modern society and the future. The overall goal is to better understand the world around us. And I use everything from history to philosophy to political theory, economics, religion, education methods, all kinds of stuff, and generally look at it from a systems perspective. I am a systems guy, and so, for example, in the first season of the show, it was all about the systems of our society, government, money, and education being the foundational systems that our society is built on. So that's overall how I approach things. I do approach things from a non-statist worldview. So if you believe that the state is the answer for XYZ, or the state should do XYZ, then you will probably have some differing opinions than myself. My view is that the state is not the answer, that the left and the right are both equally immoral and corrupt. And so I do not rely on politics to solve the world's problems. Oftentimes politics are the whole reason for the world's problems. So that's my perspective. My focus is generally on alternative perspectives, but I try to keep this fairly focused. So unfortunately, a lot of what we learn in mainstream schools and on mainstream news networks and these kinds of things are completely whitewashed. It's a lot of distraction, a lot of entertainment, a lot of stuff that doesn't really help us to understand what is truly going on and why. And so I have to seek alternative perspectives in order to get to those very important aspects. So what I do is I do have some contrarian conjecture, but when it matters, it's not trivial conspiracy theories about aliens and that kind of thing. There is plenty of conspiracy because conspiracy is history. That's pretty much the definition of all of the major changes and big historical events in the world. They typically all are founded on conspiracies of one type or another. So conspiracies are not something to be avoided or completely thrown out or scared of or turned off by, but conspiracy theories that don't really matter much in the grand scheme of things and aren't applicable to what I am covering, those are not ones that I really have much interest in. I want to focus on things that matter. I want to focus on things that are applicable and that are relevant to what I cover. So that is the overview of the podcast and my approach. And what is coming up for Season 4 is that basically I'm going to go back to the outline of all the way back to season 1, all the way back to episode 1, and I want to group episodes together and cover the material from a more macro perspective. I want to bring in some new information that I probably didn't have at the time of recording those episodes years ago. And I want to focus on the connections between all of this content and these themes and this type of thing. So, for example, season 1, like I had mentioned earlier, I focused on government money in education. And the way I structured episodes, at least for the bulk of that season, was that I would do one on government, one on money, one on education, one on the themes that were covered in the previous 3 episodes, and one case study that was relevant to those past 3 or 4 episodes. And that was a series in a sense. So what I would do for season 4 now is I would try, and I have not done so I don't know how successful I'll be or how many episodes this will actually end up being, but my goal will be to try to bring those episodes together. For example, the first series I did in season 1, starting with episode 2, was the origins of government and money and education and some of these themes of early societies, and a case study of a very early society with a governance system and organized society that did not have a formal government and a formal governmental structure. And so what I want to do is bring all of that together into one episode, do an overview of what all that content is, but also connect that to some more modern things, some things that I have been exposed to since doing the episode, make more connections between all of these. So when we look from a more macro perspective, we are going to be able to make a lot more connections. The material is going to connect a lot easier and a lot more than if you're just really honed in on some of these details. Now, if you want the details, those episodes still exist, and I still encourage you to go back and listen starting with episode 1. But when you look at it from this other perspective of a more macro view, then we can get above those details and make a lot more of these connections. So to give you an idea of what's coming for season 4 and the overall content, I'll give you an overview of what the seasons have been. Very brief overview. So season 1 was all about the systems of our society, and it covered the history of these systems, corruption involved in these systems, and alternatives to these systems. And that was the bulk of season 1. Season 2 was the digital Reformation, which was looking at the parallel between the time period of the Reformation and the modern digital age, and focused a lot on the shifts that were occurring then and are occurring now in parallel. These shifts in power and culture, technology, and basically what created the foundation of modernity, and I would go back to the Reformation, of then later Western culture, but also the digital age, and this is creating the foundation for our future culture. And so that was season 2. Season 2.5, kind of the interim period between season 2 and 3, I did some more applied aspects of some of the content I'd been covering. So a little bit on cryptocurrencies and like how to invest and how to deal with those, homesteading, applied agorism, these types of things. So I got some more practical content there. And then also got a lot into historical patterns, historical cycles, much more than just the Reformation, and some current critiques on things that are going on today, the current systems, issues going on, all of this kind of stuff. COVID-19 had started sometime around season 2-ish, maybe at the very end. And so there were a lot of parallels between what was starting to go on and the content I'd just gotten done covering. So I bring that out as well. And then season 3 looked at the original church as an alternative movement that was very comparable to modern alternative movements. It was one that was against the state, against the culture of Rome, and against the institutional religion of its day, at least to a large degree. And this alternative movement was built around an ideology and around morality. They were focused on community and building a better society. And that's very similar to modern alternative movements such as agorism And so I draw a lot of those parallels in Season 3. And that would then bring us to Season 4, which is the season that I am currently introducing. It will be a relatively short season, an overview for old-timers, an introduction for new folks, and a macro connect the dots and modern application for all of us. So I think it will be very good. I think it'll be very helpful, and I think it will serve many purposes. It will be stacking functions in a sort of way, and so that should be something that you should all look forward to, and I definitely look forward to it as well. But I am interested in your opinions, your questions. Especially if you're a longtime listener and you have some specific things about older episodes that you really want me to draw some connections to, or speak a little more on, or explain some aspect of, feel free to let me know that so that I can know ahead of time as I plan. And for everybody, I always encourage you to reach out anytime with feedback, questions, comments, whatever. That would be at rfoundations@protonmail.com. All of my information and links and things like this are in the show notes of pretty much every episode. And that's where I'm going to end this episode. I'll keep it short and just give you this introduction here, and we will get into the first episode of Season 4 in the next episode. With that, I will say that if you have not left a rating or a review for the podcast somewhere, please do so. You might have to get on an Apple account or Spotify or Amazon or who knows what. There are all these different platforms. But if you could, and if you're willing, it would be greatly appreciated if you could leave a rating and a review. Really helps out the podcast. It also helps, like I mentioned, to bring feedback and comments to my attention. And it helps a whole lot to give financially of your financial resources through Patreon or Subscribestar or cryptocurrency. That is what pays for all of the things that have to be paid for this podcast. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for just listening. That's the whole point of the show, is for listeners. So thank you for your support of all kinds. I'm out. Peace.
This has been our Foundations podcast. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.